Hey guys, welcome to my first Chaos Galaxy deck profile video. Um, I made this video by screenshotting cards from the set 1 and set 2 checklist videos. The set 2 cards didn't really turn out as well because the video was made differently. Got a lot of Zach's thumb in there, um, just because I couldn't find a frame like without his hands to the way. If you're watching this deck, it'd be really cool, and I'd really appreciate it if there was any way that that anybody watching, any fans, could download the images for the set 2 cards or the set 1 too, just so that I could have actual good images of a lot of these cards. I mean, I love the artwork. Like Infinite's probably my favorite. It's just really cool. Yeah, the deck that I made was a big deck. Like, you use a lot of really big minions. You use cards like Enderman's Telescope and Orbit to get them out cheaply, and the planet is Palicium. So as you can see, there's a ton of huge minions, and I think it's really cool how you're able to play just so many big guys. I play a lot of Hearthstone, and when I was a kid I also played Yu-Gi-Oh, so I'm getting a lot of my deck making strats off of Hearthstone. So let's get into it. Probably the key card of the deck is Enderman's Telescope. Look at the top card of your galaxy. If it is a creature card, add it to your hand, and you gain stars equal to its stars. If it's not a creature card, kill it. So when I first saw this card, I thought, like, wow, that's insane. That's overpowered. Wow. But then I realized if you're using like 50 or even like 40% resource and attachment and activator cards, I think that's what they're called, then like 40% of the time it's just a complete dud, and you just wasted a card. But and if you're playing a deck with like smaller minions as well, then like best case scenario pretty much is you just get like a 4-star minion and get to free play that, which is still alright, but it's not really necessarily good enough. So I thought, what if I made a deck where I concentrate around this card and just use like really big minions? So that's what I did. I used the planet Palicium so I can get out my Cranchon and Mental Ostices easier as well, like, because you're not always going to get your telescope, so you need more than one way to get out your big guys. So yeah, I use that for Cranchon and Zetteray, and also for Mystical Beast the Deep and Spineback Serpent. So let's get into it. So you got Omnius, 2 of them. I think it's a really cool card, and yeah, just be sick. You get your Enderman's Telescope, and bam, you get a huge 500 minion, which your opponent can kill with stuff like KO and Galaxy Crash and like Abandonment. But they only have so many of them, so you're going to get a lot of big creatures in a game. Using 2 Lava Behemoths just because it's a fantastic 8-star card. You're not really using your own resource zones much either, so it's not a huge shame to get rid of one. I'm using 2 Mantle Osses just because it's a well-statted 8-star minion. I'm not running any Relentis, but it's still good to run. I still think it's a good part of this deck. I'm using 2 Meltalons. You can also just play this card normally, and it's not that hard to do because it's 6 stars, and just a really good minion. You can kill anything with 400 health off of 6 stars, which is really good value. 2 Orbe Commanders, which is a really solid high-star minion. Same thing with Palfam and Viridius and Humongous Ancient Rockman. I'm only using 1 Rockman because it's 7 stars, so you can't really get much off of the other star, like between 7 and 8, because you're not really using any 1 or 3 or 5-star minions, so you're not really getting much off it. But it's still just a high-cost, well-statted minion, so I included it anyways. Mystical Beast of the Deep, just because it's another big Palicium. It's not as well statted, but it's still 340, 310, which is just really good stats for a minion to get out. And you can also get your Cranchons and your Mantle Osses back, which is really good. I'm only using one because of the ban list, and 2 Spineback Serpents. It's not as good as getting like a Cranshaw or such, but it's still alright to get with the planet. 2 Duple Drops. I'm not running any other small ones just for like Enderman's Telescope and Orbit and such. I think just running 2 Duple Drops is enough, honestly. And I'm running 2 Orbits, which is a really key card for this deck. It's one of the best ones. And I think it's like really insane when used in this deck, because say you have 8 stars and your opponent has 8 stars, and what you do is that you play your 8 stars and you get your Viridius, and then you use your Orbit and you get your opponent's 8 stars, and then you play your Lava Behemoth, and then your opponent's left with none. So you just use 8 of your opponent's stars for free. They don't even get any back, but it's not always going to work out that way, but it's still going to work out like pretty well for you most of the time. So I think Orbits, like almost just as good as Enderman's Telescope in this deck, maybe even better, because I haven't really tested it, because I can't really do that. 2 Eternity Amulets, because it's sort of like a win condition for your deck. Even if you use it on like Spineback Serpent, you can get some insane stats like that. But the best is with like Omnius, where if you got an Omnius and you kill, say, even a Spineback Serpent, he's still pretty much invincible, except if you get KO'd or Galaxy Crashed. But again, your opponent only has so much of those. And 2 Anth Amulets. A lot of people might overlook this card because they think like, wow, that's a lot of effects. How am I gonna use this card like well? What deck would I put it in? But I think that all the effects are just solid effects. I think it's just a solid card, and when used with things like Chaos and Palicium cards, you get stuff from like your grave and your hand, which is fantastic in this deck, because you have really good cards in your hand, and you'll have really good cards in your grave, because these guys are eventually going to die. So I think this deck is really competitive. I think it's really cool, and I think it would be really fun and like unique as well. I think it could beat any deck in the Chaos Chronicles series. Sorry. But yeah, I just think it's a really cool deck, and I had this idea one day, and I really wanted to share it with people. And yeah, there's more cards that I could have put in as well, but I decided not to. I almost made this a Barrow deck, so I could put cards like Atatrox and Dan. He'd also be used well with Humongous Ancient Rockman. I almost put 2, but the 7 stars thing. Which is not bad for a card to all. I think 8-star cards are usually better, but it's not bad for a card to be 7 stars in a deck where you use like 1 and 3 and 5-star minions. But with Barrow, I think Barrow's the best planet card, and like Palicium's also really, really good. But when used with cards like that and Atatrox, you can get some early game you can get some early game to slow down your opponent. Like, they can't always just attack you in the face, because if you can't get your big guys out fast enough, then your opponent can just kill you before you have the chance to do any of your big combos. And smaller minions would certainly help, but I decided to go full-on big minion deck, and I thought Palicium was just better. I think it's a lot more consistent to get your big guys when you have Palicium, but just really good cards when used with Barrow as well, because they can also remove big minions as well. You can also just use Gigantros instead of Drainchel, but I thought Drainchel was just a cooler card. I really like Gigantros too, but Guster, just to slow your opponent down early in the game. It's the same with Slush Infestation. I think these are both really good cards. I didn't use Galaxy Crash. I think it's pretty much an auto-include in any deck but this one, because you're going to have a big guy out a lot of the time, and this card just ends up killing your big guy too. So I decided not to use Galaxy Crash. Meteoroid Storm, also just, we did this deck doesn't have much in getting rid of resource cards, besides kind of Lava Behemoth, so your opponent can't really play any without using stars to get resource zones. But I decided it wasn't quite good enough to in this deck to include, because you're just going to have enough big guys anyways. these activator cards are all really, really solid. They could be used in like any control deck, honestly, or almost any deck, just to slow down your opponent and get rid of some of his threats. But I decided you have to be really sparing on how many resource and attachment and activator cards you put in this deck because of Enderman's Telescope. Yeah, this deck, if you draw the Enderman's Telescope and you don't get a big minion, it's not that devastating because you can still like just pay your stars to get your big guys out. But I decided not quite good enough to put in the deck with this deck. I thought still just going for consistency rather than safety. Naked just to keep your guy, make sure that your guys are alive so they can't get KO'd or ice elixired. I almost put this card in the deck. Upside Down Realm just for the Meltalons because it's an insane combo. And Orbov sort of for the same reason as Atatrox and Day, just so that you don't get ran over really early game. But I decided not to choose these guys just for this core deck. I think this is a really cool deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave your thoughts. And also, if you've ever made a deck or have any ideas for a deck, share that in the comments too. And Zach, if you're watching this, I think your game is really cool, and send me free cards.